you very much. I spend most of my day opening boxes, well, sterilizing the boxes from deliveries and then opening them and then sterilizing the bottles and then tasting them or logging them and tasting them. And,
Not getting old yet, no?
Sorry?
Not getting old yet, no, all that.
No, I mean, there are worse situations to be, but so business continues as usual for Naked. Wine keeps moving, fortunately. And yeah, busy and happy tasting. And then really also working on little projects within Naked in terms of how we can support the NHS, how we can support other key workers. And those are bits and pieces that I'm a party to as well as sniffing and tasting wines. Yeah.
Very good. Cool.
Luca, can I just quickly touch on what you just mentioned there was the, you're tasting Brisas and you're drinking it because it's a nice light red, but you're in a warm, still currently warm climate. Is there anything you can sort of share with us? Because we actually it's been beautiful weather here in the UK. I would say warm in the evenings, but what would you recommend with regards serving temperatures of a red or a white wine? The Brisas is a lightish red. So how do you serve that? Do you take it from the fridge or how do you taste it?
The Brisas, usually I have a small controlled temperature little sort of wine fridge, and for the red compartment is about 16 degrees Celsius, between 16 and 18, and for me that's perfect, because by the time I open it and it gets a bit of air, it's about 18. So, and well, probably at the end of the night it's already 22, but it's still fair, it's still good. So for Brisas I would go for 16, 18. Sabatico the same, actually. I wouldn't go lower. Maybe if it was a Pinot or something like that, maybe slightly chilled. If it was a high alcohol wine, but
Luca, just translating that into normal people, as in like I don't have a temperature control in my fridge or in my house, and in fact where I live it sort of heats up and then it cools down quite a bit. So in terms of like relative values, so for the lighter reds, which Brisas is, would that be you don't need to chill it, but if there's an outhouse or somewhere where it's cooler, that's better for that.
Yeah. Or the other option is if you only have a fridge, you just put it in the fridge for 1 hour before you start when you start cooking, put it in the fridge, and then as soon as you're done, pop it, and then you should be good. Okay. It's just cool it slightly below 20 degrees. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. So I think a lot of people on this side of the world or on this upper half of the world would relate reds to room temperature and whites to fridge, or let's call it 30 minutes to an hour outside of a fridge. That's a good sort of metric. So with your red, which is a lighter red, you might pop it in the fridge on a nice warm daytime or warm evening, and then you take it out and it's and what does that do? Why would you do that to a red? What are you looking for by putting a red wine in the fridge even for 30 minutes?
Yeah, I think maybe in England, I don't know what the temperature is
like.
In
United Kingdom, the whole United Kingdom.
United Kingdom, good point. In the UK, maybe there is a different sort of temperature. The ambiance temperature is slightly lower than here. I mean, here we still are 30 degrees maximum temperature even today. So I think in your part of the world, as you say, it's maybe okay to just have it room temperature because maybe it's lower, so it's fine. You can still enjoy it, but you can also. I think that if you cool it down, it brings more sort of less the spice and the alcohol, and brings more red fruits. And I think it has an impact on the kind of aromas you get.
Cool. Okay. So it's to bring out the brightness, the fruitiness. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Eamon, one last thing before I hand back to you and you and Luca kick off the chat. With regards to whites, what I've observed over the years, I used to be, as I keep repeating in your ear the whole time, Eamon, I used to be a sommelier for Gordon Ramsay. But what on a high level, the way to look at white wines and how to drink them, I sort of break it down to, first of all, occasion. And basically, if it's in the middle of the day, it's a picnic or it's a barbecue, just wet the lips, just make it refreshing and easy drinking. So don't worry too much about it, basically. Secondly, if you step out of that situation and you're in the evening time, something like Pinot Grigio and Sauvignon Blanc, I think they're sort of destined to be fridge temperature, and their happiness, and they show off all their aromatics or lack thereof. When you take another variety like Chardonnay, and maybe Chardonnay that's slightly oaked, it's fine from the fridge. But when you take it out of the fridge, it actually, in a way, expands on the palate. It just shows a bit more breadth. And for some, that can be more interesting. Also, things like Gavi or things like that. They're cool, they're delicious when they're cool and fresh from the fridge. But when you let them slightly, not room temperature, but out of the fridge, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you'll just see this breath on the palate come out. And it just makes the wine, it's just another dimension of the wine that you don't see. So to conclude, really, coolness, coldness, reduces the aromatics, the flavor, and the interest of the wine. So it's a way to you decide how long you want to take it out of the fridge and what you want to do. So that will be it. Yeah, Eamon.
Cool. Thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
We did a quick straw poll there, and we've got almost 400 people on the call tonight. So this is a record attendance. So thanks everyone for joining. You're very welcome, whether you've been before or this is your first time. We're here with Luca Hodgkinson, winemaker down in Chile, and Ray, my sidekick and resident wine nut. And the vast majority of people are drinking on this call, which is good news. Mostly drinking something from anywhere other than either Luca's wines or Chile, but we've got a few people drinking your wines, Luca, here, and also some people drinking Chilean wines. Let's kick off. Getting to know Luca. I think from my perspective, we first met, I think, around 2 years ago now. I was on a trip to Chile with Ray, and we're very much on the lookout for new talent from Chile. And I think a lot of people will know Chile as one of the big brands, cheap and cheerful. Lots of fruit, just easy drinking wines, nothing terribly serious. That is kind of Chile's image to most people, most wine consumers. But just then when you go down there, if anyone's been, you can't help but be utterly blown away by the place. And you basically got a long, narrow strip of land on the edge of South America, which is just heavily influenced by the ocean, by the Andes Mountains. Got a patchwork of ancient volcanic soils. So everything's just so extreme, everything's so dramatic, and of course you got 300 days of sunshine, so it's just kind of heaven for growing grapes, right? But at the same time you got all this potential, but equally you've got this image problem which has been cultivated over the years, and which is in reality very hard for Chile to shake off. So when we met Luca, it was amazing because we got a sense for your story, what you're trying to achieve, and it just felt like Naked was really set up to help to work with people like you, Luca. Let's start with maybe your story, your where you came from originally. I know you are Spanish, born in Barcelona, to is it French mother, Italian father, and you went to France and now you're in Chile. So where do I even start there? How about you tell us how you got where you are now?
I think I'm a kind of a result of Europe in a way, because my father and my mother met in Spain. Both my father, as you said, is English and my mother is French. So I have like these two cultures, and I was raised in Barcelona and lived there, and that's where my pre-rat roots come from. So I think it's just the result of the integration of all these countries in Europe together, and how do I land here in Chile? Well, before I landed here, I actually worked in Spain, of course, a bit. I studied in France all my enology career, and worked in France. I worked in Italy. I worked in Spain, and then I traveled to Chile and Argentina for harvest season, just looking for a seasonal job, and I was offered a great position here, and I couldn't not take it because it was huge responsibility, and it allowed me to convert a whole estate into organic viticulture, which was a great experience. And I was also actually overseeing two countries in terms of production. I was seeing Argentina and Chile as a winemaker and technical manager, which was really an amazing experience. And after nearly 7-8 years of this job, I quit, and I took a sabbatical year. That's why my name, first wine name, is sabbatical. And came back to Chile with today my wife, and at the time was my girlfriend.
Very cool. And what was your, we all have this wow, those who are lucky enough to work in the wine trade, we had this first wow moment with wine. What was your moment which made you go, wow, I'm hooked, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
Maybe it's a bit of there's no like straight answer, because it's a bit of a soak-in a way. My father bought a property without the idea of making wine, just as a kind of hobby. He bought a property in Priorat, but at the time it wasn't the Priorat we know today. It was the poorest area of Catalonia. The wine was all sold in bulk to Barcelona bars, and Priorat just was a very heavy, strong wine. And so he bought this place, and all the family went there every weekend, and we worked in vines, almonds, olive trees, whatever. Just sold everything to cooperatives, whatever it was we were producing, and that's how I slowly soaked into nature. Second, into viticulture as a sort of first input, and finally into wine with my mother, who's a great cook, and my father, who drinks. So it's a fantastic match to go for wine. I mean, how couldn't you become a winemaker with this context?
Sounds like I need to get over there once this thing is over.
You too, and you too, Ray, and everybody here is invited.
Cool. So yeah, we'll definitely get back to Priorat in a little while, because that's the Spanish leg of your story. So you went to winemaking school in Bordeaux, of all places, so the home of wine and winemaking. And you told me once that after learning everything there, you had to unlearn a lot of what you learned. Tell me a bit about that.
Yes, of course. Yes, the first thing that shocked me most in the viticulture school that I was attending was that we had exams about how to spray pesticides and insecticides in general into the vines. And I was permanently asking if there were any alternatives, if there were, could you do something else? But the teachers simply wouldn't know, or didn't have the technical knowledge to explain that. So that was like my first shock, that in an exam I had to draw a calendar treatment of a vineyard with 14 treatments per year of things I don't want to even remember. So that was the first shock, and the second shock was the amount of industrialization that there is in the winemaking process, which is I guess a normal tendency for all all food grades that we consume to go into a process that is more industrial and more controlled. That is fine, but in that process we forget about the knowledge, and we forget about basic principles, and such as hygiene, temperature control, or things you can do before adding anything to your wine. And in that way, when you go out of a university, of a winemaking university, enology university in France, you are prepared to do an industrialized wine with lots of corrective methods, with lots of additives. I mean, I could show you a book of additives of our supplies of additives, and it's like a little Bible, So you can add so much stuff into wine that I was a bit sort of thrown away by all that. And that's why when I arrived in Chile, the first job offers, like serious job offer that I got, first thing I said is, okay, but I want to go organic and low intervention winemaking. So that's how I kind of I reacted to all these this input of very technical interventionist process, and I'm trying to go the other side now without forgetting the science. It's not just being a hippie and saying, yeah, just leave the grapes there and the wine will make itself. No, this is not what I'm talking. I'm talking about making good wine without needing to add all these stuff that we can add. That's basically it.
Luca, would you say that? Excuse me. Would you say that there was obviously a period in time where additives were non-existent and they weren't an option, and yet winemaking, viticulture and winemaking already existed and made wine a relevant, not commodity, but product, something that people drank. So did you familiarize yourself with what they used to do, what you can do today with all this list of additives, and then sort of choose a moderate middle ground of how do you observe sanitation so the wine doesn't taste bitter, oxidized, vinegary, but it respects or reflects the vineyard? Is that sort of the way you approached it, or like?
Yes. Yes, in a way. I think that for instance, sulfur I think was seriously used. I think the first time. Well, first it was the burning sulfur, so that it was solid sulfur that you burned to sanitize the barrels. Actually, that the original idea was to sanitize the barrels, and it was a Dutch royal decree, I think, that was the first sort of written record that we have on the use of sulfur, and it derived into the use of sulfur into wine. And that's like maybe, I don't recall now, but that's maybe 200 or 300 years ago, maybe not, so, and we've been doing wine for 6,000 years, according to some historians. Yeah. So I think that, for instance, sulfur is the major additive you have in the wines has really been studied the last 50 years, apart from the fact that they were using it for sanitizing the barrels. So you have to find between these so-called ingredients, your way between it. I try to avoid all ingredients except sulfur, unless strictly necessary. And that's like my main focus. And of course, sulfur, I keep it the lowest as possible. And not to mention that my sort of, I don't know if it's my tasting or the way I've been now habituated, accustomed to drink low sulfur wines. Now I drink wine with more than 25 parts per million of free sulfur, and I immediately have a little headache, and it comes to me like right in 10 seconds. I have a little headache in my
it seems like you've been accustomed. Amy, what do you think, or where you were going to say? Sorry.
So again, people will have an image of Chilean wines, and in reality, there's about 5 big corporations producing 90% of the Chilean wines that get out there, and a lot of that is big brands made to a recipe, probably the opposite of what you're talking about here. Describe your Chile. Describe where you're making wines. What we should expect from them.
From the new Chile, you mean, or?
From your part in San Javier, where you are.
Yeah, no, I think in these areas there's a big wave that started a few years ago already. I'm not a pioneer in that at all. Where they were trying to relieve and give another vision of very old vineyards that were really abandoned, or just not abandoned actually, that were just very very poorly sold in the market and used as the base wine for most of the exporters of cheap wine. And most of these grapes were Cinsault, Carignan, and Pays. And all these have the ability to resist dry weather, to show decent production according to where they are, and to have a little bit of color, a little bit of acidity, you know, just enough what you need to get a sort of base wine. And with the work of many other winemakers around me, they've been slowly discovering fantastic small vineyards that can achieve a beautiful quality, like Telúrico or Sabático, which come from one only vineyard of very old vines, introduced many years ago, that have now been on the international scene very well rated and very well reported.
Yeah, very cool. And when we rocked up 2 years ago, had you heard of Naked before? And yeah, what did you think when we pitched the idea to you?
Don't mention us on that trip, please. Just straight to business.
No, it was. Of course, I knew about you guys, and actually, I have part of my family in UK, and my uncle, who's probably around, actually, looking at us right now. Hello, Tim, by the way. He actually was the first one to talk to me about Naked Wines, and I think I reached out to you, but at the time, I don't know. You weren't there, Eamon, or I don't know.
Yeah, possibly.
Anyway, of course, I knew about you, and I think your model is amazing. And now that I have the stage and the opportunity, I would like to thank you, all of you that is watching, because especially in these times, it helps us to keep alive and to keep our growth going. And to focus on making wine instead of thinking in selling and in marketing and in financial problems. I think that a winemaker needs focus, and that's what you can give us, which is the best that we can get from you guys. And I think that from the vintage that I started with you, so the first wine that I did, like 100% specifically for you, would be the 2019. So if I'm not mistaken, yes. So from 2019 onwards, I think there's a jump in quality thanks to that, because I'm not consulting anymore. I'm just doing a couple of very small consulting that don't take me too much time, and I'm focusing into the making of the wine.
That's great to hear. And I really got a sense for when we met that it's the classic kind of trap that a small winemaker is locked into, unfortunately, in your situation and many others, where selling wine is a lot harder than making wine, and the time it takes to sell the wine obviously takes a lot more time than it does to make it. And every day, every hour you're out of the vineyard, out of the cellar, is obviously takes away from the ultimate quality of the wine. And it's just that kind of vicious cycle where you can't make too much wine, because then you need to sell a lot of wine. So you make a small amount and you try to do a side job and just scrap by. So when we're able to meet someone who's talented and who's great at what they do, and then trust them to make the wine taste great, and then we look after the selling part, which is what we can do well. It just works. It just works out. So I really got that sense. You were saying you couldn't make a certain vintage because you couldn't afford the oak barrels, because you had to go off and sell your last vintage first before you could finance the next vintage. And it just seemed crazy from the quality that you can make and the potential of the place. It was it really felt like a no-brainer to get involved. And now your wines are in the side, and thousands of UK customers have drunk them at Naked. The ratings aren't up there, mid-90s with some of the more popular wines, Arabella's and stuff. But how would you recommend people enjoy your wines best, because you do see people either absolutely love them or go, this wasn't for me. This is just not what I expected from Chile.
Well, you've just said the word. It's not what you expect from Chile. I think that's that's the thing. So I think the expectation issue is the main thing, I guess, because from Chile, I don't think you have many Carignan Grenache. So these two varietals have a natural high acidity. And they come with a backbone of alcohol and volume and sun, and the two give a great balance. That is very, I think, and they tell me that it's pretty unusual taste for Chile. And the comment I get, the comment I get very often from Chilean consumers here is, oh, but it doesn't taste like Chilean, and the Chileans tell me this. So I guess this is like one of the first things. You buy wine from Luca, don't expect a Chilean classic juice.
So what would you say, Luca? That, I mean, have you gone for a purist, eclectic, slightly off the beaten track style of wine? And I guess just for the people who are attending this evening, sort of give the two styles, yours versus the traditional, and then why, or basically people can make up their own mind, I guess, at that point. So how would you describe, let's take Sabbatico or Lirio versus a classic, if we name a Chilean brand, but Conciliatoro Merlot or Conciliatoro Cabernet, and then you. So where do you sit, and why have you done that?
I think the differences are in both in the vineyard and in the cellar. But if you go to the vineyard,
I guess, Luca, sorry, I should just clarify my point in flavor profile. So just go back down to what's in the glass, and have you gone towards more of a vibrant raspberry, fresh and electric red wine, perhaps lighter and pure, and versus what I think lots of customers in the UK are used to, which is soft, round, smooth, easy drinking. And I guess just signposting to help people. They love Chile, they want to love you. What's the how would you difference between those two?
Yes, I think that the classic, what we define as the classic Chile, if there is anything like that in terms of let's say Cabernet or Merlot, would be, of course, a very easy drinking wine that would have a little bit of oak, but new oak, but in a small proportion. That would be, pretty ripe. So you would have usually more of a black fruit, slightly jamminess. I expect that. Very low acidity, definitely. That makes it always very sort of blue, very blue wine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, in that way. So I think that's
popular. Yeah.
That's right. That would be the sort of the classic. And if I have to oppose that to me, I would say that maybe our wines are definitely have a higher vibrant acidity. It is balanced with a percentage of alcohol that is always around 14.5. So it's got volume, and the perception of the aroma, the complexity is very different because I use big oak casks, always 600 liter or 500 liter, as opposed to the classic 225 Bordeaux barrels. And they allow me to keep the wine longer, and I have a very different profile of the oak in my wines too. So combined with the more sort of acidic red fruits, eventually, I think that's like how I could define.
That's good. I think what I take away from that personally is that you are more you're on the more sort of fresher, lively, zesty style of a red wine, maybe also better suited to the hot climate we have in the UK, but beautiful sunshine. And then there's the traditional soft, round, and sometimes, if I dare say, maybe a little bit obvious or predictable. So your wines might be a welcome step off the beaten track rewarded with quality, So that's maybe a way to look at it. Yeah, it's still Chile. It's just Chile gone left, and still very good. Eamon, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to put on the handbrake there and jump over to Ray and what you have been drinking this week. And before we just do that, I'll encourage anyone to use the Q&A function down below if you have a question for Luca. Hopefully we'll get to cover a few of them. So either in the chat box or the Q&A, let us know if you've got any questions for Luca. And Ray, over to Ray's Empties.
Okay. Well, okay. So as I said at the beginning of the call, if any of you were on at that time, that I receive multiple samples every day, and I wash the box, and then I open the box and I sterilize the samples with sanitizer. Anyway, just following general protocol. Have we got enough light here? I think that bulb is gone. Sorry, this is on now. So, but what I do, I taste a number of wines, and I just wanted to show you very briefly a couple of wines that are worthy of mention. This wine, which I have to show you the back, it has no label. It's a work in progress, but this is David Tofstrup, who makes La Nemfina from Yecla in Spain. He's the Dane from Spain, 2 times Spanish winemaker of the year. So I know that he can make this beautiful Spanish wine. He was talking to me about it. Anyway, so this is a very fresh, aromatic, zesty white wine. It's a work in progress. All of this is a work in progress. These are very ugly labels / no labels, but this is sort of the backgrounds of the beginnings of a wine project. Okay, so this is from Spain, fruity. This is Mauricio Lorca. Eamon and I went to Argentina probably the same time. It was the same time we first met you, Luca. Was that 2 years ago or so? And Mauricio Lorca showed us this Pedro Jimenez variety, grape variety, and it went off with a bang. And so this is the 2020 vintage, so very early sampling. So they're they're in the southern hemisphere, so they are showing us they pick earlier in the year than the northern hemisphere. That's from Palo Secreto. Can't really tell you very much about that, but that actually could be a massive white wine. But it's Glera, which is the white grape to make Prosecco.
Yeah.
And then he's done a little bit of handiwork, and gosh, it's a little bit too difficult to not think that this might be the next big thing. But I'm just telling you bits and pieces. We'll have to wait and see how it turns out. Connie, Luca, you know Connie. We spent we had a great. Remember that time, Eamon? We had a headphone off. We had a headphone competition. Down on the coast in Chile that time we first met, and but this is Connie's. It was in the Christmas case last year. Kimbao X, an absolutely beautiful fruit profile. Aromatics and flavor and the body, and so this is the next vintage of that. And oh my god, actually I did a tasting with Connie on the phone as I went through the samples, and that was cool. It was very personable to just to talk about the wine and share it, and more of that. I think I'll probably try and taste more wines with winemakers on the other side of the phone. Virgil Jolly, I wonder if anyone on chat or Q&A could just give a thumbs up if they know Virgil Jolly or love Virgil Jolly. But this is Virgil Jolly. You won't be able to read that, but it's Plan de Dieu. That is from the South Rhone, and in the South Rhone you have Châteauneuf du Pape, and you also have Gigondas and Vacuras, and you also have where Dennis Crespo is. He's in Quiraine, and there's about 11 villages there, all scattered around, and Plan de Dieu is one of them. And it's one of those sort of unsung heroes, which uses the same grape varieties as Châteauneuf du Pape and Quiraine and so on. So it's Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvèdre. And this 2019 is bloody gorgeous. It's very tasty. It's small bottle, big taste. It's beautiful. And okay, last 2 wines, very briefly. This is, I think I mentioned last week, we have a fine wine club, and we select there's 6 wines every quarter, And when I was in Chile last time, Luca, I saw you in October.
That's
and this
right.
will sound very indulgent, certainly for the circumstances that we're living in, but Edgard Carter and yourself and Jose Miguel made, was it crab souffle on a barbecue or something like that? I mean, it was pretty rough and ready, the settings, but it was black.
Another tough day on the job, Ray, was it?
No, but I just wanted to quantify. It was, from a half-beaten barrel that they set a fire on top of. It wasn't fine dining, but it was very good. In any case, on that trip, October last year, Connie, who I just mentioned, put me in touch with Luca. Would you know this producer? It's from Natalia Poblete. And,
of course.
Yeah, and this is, and Maria Jose, I think.
Yeah.
And gosh, it's a beautiful Carignan, like after your own heart. So this wine is going in the Fine Wine Club case that is going out this week, I think. And so I was tasting that just to check it's good to go. And then finally, and then I hand it back to you, Eamon. This is Lirio from Luca, and this is this is Carignan and Carmenere. Slight adjustment to the previous one. And I guess to summarize, it has, like you said earlier, Luca, it has the raspiness, the raspberry vibrancy. It just has a bit more sort of roundness and mid-palate texture. So, but it's looking really good. So that concludes this week's samples. Eamon.
Very good. Thank you, Ray. Jump into a few questions from the audience. Audrey Gray, Luca. If you had not been a winemaker, what would you have been? Great question.
Two options. Either I would go into acting. I was going to study acting as an actor, and the other one was how do you say that in English? That would be when you keep forests and natural parks, you are a forest guardian or something.
Yeah, groundskeeper or estate keeper.
Yeah, that's right, groundskeeper. Those were the two other options.
You're a naturalist.
Yeah, always.
Well, we're surprised to see you with clothes on, but at least you've got wild on your clothes.
Exactly.
It speaks volumes.
Question here from Gordon. Great to hear your story. How have you been able to manage this vintage with the COVID restrictions? So out in the vineyard and all that.
Yeah, good point. We were very concerned that we weren't going to be able to harvest some of our more late ripening grapes, but we finally managed. We just had to, when you harvest, you usually have maybe 20, 30 persons harvesting in one day. So we just had to, put a protocol to let these people know how to work without, being close to each other or using gloves and masks, and to avoid any contact between them. That was like the only issue. Well, if it was an issue, but we managed. Thankfully, we weren't affected by the coronavirus in terms of harvest. Thankfully,
that's great.
Very good. David Murphy asks, how do we avoid these big companies? Name names. David, just buy from Naked Wines, as I'm sure you do. Susanna, Luca, would the acidity in the sabbatical lead to good aging? Great question. How would it improve in bottle if I leave it a few years? Curious.
Oh, I think it's for me, it's the way to go. I think the more I have, the first edition of Sabbatico was 2014, and we still have, of course, a few bottles, not many. And it was a slightly different blend at the time, but I have to say the wine evolves beautifully. The acidity is a kind of natural protection of the wine. So the first thing is that the evolution is going to be very slow and steady. And it has aged in, as I said, big oak casks. So the ability to get a more substantial complexity with aging is there. So for me, the more you age it, the better in a way. And we did invest. I mean, the cork is a good cork, so we have at least a 12-year guarantee, if I'm not mistaken. So we're good to go for a long time. And I can assure you it will age really well.
Yeah, cool, very good. Really good question here. Would you make a Mark Jeffries? Your portfolio is very red heavy. Could you tell us about any white wines that you might make, or maybe a rosé, Luca? Would you like to?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, well, you guys mentioned your trip last 2 years before, and we did visit a vineyard that was, I hope, very special for you guys, at the top of a cliff, where it was these old vineyards of Cinsault. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
At the end of the day, and everybody had a few tastings before that, but we were still in good shape. And this vineyard produces already our Cinsault red, Lisas, and with Ray we discussed this at the time, that Cinsault is a great variety for rosé. So it's coming for you. It's a Cinsault rosé from the same producer in Guadalquivir. So that's really down South Chile. It's about, to give you an idea, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago. You surely remember that.
Yep.
And it's so it's a very the climate is very much influenced by the sea. We are 20 kilometers away from the sea, 25. Low altitude, 250 meters above the sea level, and harvested much earlier for the rosé than for the red. And this is a little secret that I will share with you now, and I didn't tell Ray, so I hope you you don't mind. But we added
We're all friends here.
very, very, very tiny amount of Muscat grapes. Very, very tiny amount. So it's so tiny, it's not worth mentioning it, but it's just there. Yeah, and it gives the final lift in the nose, which is really beautiful. So it's going to be there hopefully very soon. Like, we're shipping next month, so it should be there in June for you guys. Hopefully for your hot days. 12.5 alcohol, and it seems in lees tearing right now. So I'm just moving the wine tank with the natural lees from fermentation,
preparing it for finishing. Yeah, very good.
Exactly. So yeah, and I'm very happy with the result. Ready.
What was so I remember that day. It was a great day. But driving to that vineyard, I think we called into just driving along the road, a farmhouse that was producing its own dodgy alcohol type drink. What was that called? And could you tell us?
I think it's where you said something like give pace a chance. No, give pace a give pace a chance. And we tried the pace, and we tried the different versions of pace, which are there's a kind of a version of Chacolí. I mean, the Chilean version. Yeah. It's not coming from the Pipeño.
Yeah, it would put hairs in your chest anyway.
The people, yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, didn't consider it for a listing on Naked Wines, unfortunately.
It didn't work, no.
And unfortunately, it would have been great, obviously, to go on tour and maybe taste that rosé together in June, July. But obviously for good reasons, that's not happening. Tell us when you do go on tour and you get a chance to meet all the other winemakers and try other wines from all over the world. What's your favorite bottle that you reach for?
Yeah. I've got my little booklet here from the year I came. So the red would be I love the Pinot Noir from Martinborough from Rod. I love that very much. Yeah. That's there are all the wines are really good. That's one of the things I did see and taste. It's really the average quality of I would say this wine fair is like up like that, and Pinot Noir is really very nice. Oh, sorry, I've got some business.
Bring him in. Hello.
Dis bonjour.
Bonjour.
Hello, guys. This is called lockdown effect.
Are you in French or in Spanish or how do we?
That's it, Ray. Amen.
Bonjour.
Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
Sorry, guys. Okay,
No,
so
no, come on,
wine.
it's a key.
He's got his booklet. He's happy.
Bye bye. He's thinking. He heard Rod's Martin Burke Pinot Noir, and he was like, "I love that."
And the whites, I loved the barrel fermented Viognier from Nina.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that I love Viognier in general, but this one barrel fermented was from
Hey,
Nina.
you're back.
Allez, allez, comment? Vas-y. Oui, c'est bon. Je suis occupé là. J'ai des gens qui m'attendent. Ok, vas-y.
Very good. Good question here from Edward Wargent. Chilean wines tend to use French grapes. How well do you think more traditional Spanish grapes could do in Chile? I'm asking because his favorites are Albarino and Tempranillo. So that's a great question. You know, a lot of your wines are Carignan, Garnacha. Like, how did these Spanish varietals end up in Chile many moons ago? And how would you compare them to the standard Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay that we'd all?
Yes, the history of Chile was first. I mean, the viticultural history of Chile was first, of course, established by Spanish, of course, and the países all over the continent in South America, from Mexico to Argentina, Chile, Peru, and all these places. And as the time went by, the southern parts remained sort of less influenced by the foreign influence. And it started with, and then around Santiago, all the foreign grape varieties started coming, Cabernet, Merlot, and with them also Carmener, thinking it was actually Merlot. And really the Spanish influence is later in the time. And the Carignan, for instance, comes with an earthquake in 1939, where they tried to find a way to help the producers that had lost their stock of wine, and the cooperatives organized themselves to import what they called improving varietals. And Carignan, because of the color, because of the yield, and because of the resistance to drought, seemed like a good candidate. It did work, but at the time, the south of Chile, Maule, I'm talking about now, is still, it did rain quite a lot. So if it wasn't planted in the right place, you would get these really acidic and very diluted wines. Even with color, they wouldn't be interesting at all. But as the time went by and the vineyards grew older, and the drought slowly in Chile is becoming more severe, these grapes suddenly show up beautifully. So I think it's the center of Chile is more influenced by French varietals, and the south of Chile a bit more with Cinsault, Carignan, and a very tiny bit of Grenache. Grenache is very little planted in Chile, so it's really a very small amount of hectares. So the Spanish influence in terms of varietals is really low impact for the moment.
Great. Justin Cole, currently watching in a hot tub, enjoying small Sauvignon. So Justin's winning at life. Hallie asks, you mentioned the 2019 being even better than the wine you've made before, as Naked have allowed you to spread your wings. What have you done differently?
Focusing in wines, basically, focusing in the winemaking and the viticulture. At the time before Naked Wines, I had to find a place where I could make wine that wasn't too costly, that was not too far away from the vineyard, from my house. This was all very complex. I had to travel a lot. And meanwhile, I had to consult with 7 projects at the time I was doing. So, 7 small projects is a lot of work. What happens when you're a winemaker and you care about wines is that finally you get more attention into your clients' wines than your own wines, because finally they're the ones paying your wage in a way. So you are kind of, more worried about their wines than your own. And this has completely inverted now. Now I'm, you know, and really focusing on our wines, and that has changed completely the picture. And I also, it's a different feeling, you know, to make the wines more focused and more settled on. I think focus is like the main thing to get a good wine going. So yeah, it has changed a lot for me.
Look, if I can just quickly say,
yeah,
that is a really that has struck me in terms of yes, we're a professional like you and a wine lover at the same time, but someone who needs to pay the bills. The restrictions and the limitations where you could allow yourself to love a wine and babysit a wine, albeit not your wine, and then you go for that at the risk of slightly not neglecting but championing one wine over your other over yours. And I guess, as you just said yourself, and I'm not saying, but where Naked has helped, it's allowed you to just make your wine great again. And God, that was almost a Trumpian quote. You know, but that's I you know, it's lovely to hear that. I can now understand how that could happen, where your attention could sway one way, and if the funding from Angels allows you to put your attention wholly onto your talent into your wine, that's gold. And it's something I hadn't really wholly contemplated before. So nice one.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no, and like in the midterm, my sort of personal goal is to only do our wines. For the moment, I still have 2 projects that I follow, which they're friends, so you know, I just can't, you know, abandon them.
Yeah.
But
it's a community, isn't it? Yeah,
that's right. And it's also nice to do other wines. But it really, my idea is to sort of let go everything and to focus on winemakers and the wines we do for you. It's really.
Yeah.
Cool. Dominique has a question from Facebook. What is one of the hardest things about winemaking year in and year out?
Before Naked or after Naked?
Both. Yeah, go on.
No, before Naked is for me is the financial part, you know, and getting the bills paid and the producers paid and get them a fair price and everything. I think that's the most challenging part. And of course, secondly is the selling of the grapes. And you have to be, even I think for most of the jobs in general, but as a winemaker, you have to do everything all the time. So you have to be able to know how to export, to know what a packaging looks like, to know about paper, to know about printing techniques, to know about corks, to know about bottles, cases, of course, wine and grapes, and you know, the whole. It's a very sort of multi-dimensional work, and I think you know, again, I come back to what I said before, but the more you can focus on the essential, it's the better for the wine. So the difficult things are definitely financial aspects and how to deal with them, because most of the beginning of these projects is with your personal money. So basically, it's your family money that you're putting into wine, and secondly, selling the grapes, and I mean the wine, of course.
I think you've articulated very well what exactly what we're trying to achieve at Naked, working with people like you. So yeah, thanks for expressing it way better than I ever could.
Thanks to you.
Dawn Simmons says Roddy soap can do no wrong in my opinion. You're right. I'm not going to tell him that, but thanks, Dawn. Lots of people asking, what's your favorite like food and wine pairing for your wines?
Good one.
Food and wine pairing.
We have a vegetarian option as well, please.
Okay, so for this wine, for a Sabático, Sabático is, as we said before, is Grenache and Carignan, so it's a 50-50 blend, roughly, depending on the year. And the complexity on the nose with these acidic fruits and the old oak contact gives a very subtle nose, and it goes very well for me with a fungi risotto. very simple. It's not too heavy. You know, you have a bit of cheese, so that always helps. But it has this complex nose that goes very well with Sabatico, I think. And for Telúrico, by the way, this is a new packaging.
Nice.
For Telúrico, I would go more for something like lamb with a kind of either a mint sauce or a rosemary dressing. You know, more consistent, more concentrated.
Yeah, delish.
Very good.
I
agree?
Okay.
I agree. I was just saying on the Sabatico, also that sort of Middle Eastern type dish, like pomegranate. It has this sort of like zest in the cranberry liveliness in the palate, and so you know that sort of meze. You know, if you're vegetarian, putting things together, just bits and pieces is what Sabatico feels like to me. It's a sort of it's a happy wine. It's a sort of stuff on the table type of wine, so bits and pieces. But yeah, the Telúrico is lamb, beautiful. Yeah, nice.
I enjoyed mine earlier with my 2 screaming children, aged 3 and 1, and that was a great match. I just slammed it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're just about out of time, so I just want to say thank you very much, Luca, for joining us today. It's been a really fascinating chat, and really great for you to meet lots of angels on the call. And yeah, thank you for your delicious wines. You know, everything you do. We're only too happy to allow you, focus your time on making the stuff taste great, and we'll do the rest. So yeah, keep the good fight going, and we will lap up everything you do. Can't wait to see the rosé soon as well. So
yeah,
and thanks to all the customers and angels on the call.
Thanks
as
for
well.
everyone for following. Thanks for everyone for
Thank
watching tonight. Nice one, Luca.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.